lovers of literature present here. On behalf of Rajendra, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you. And you are aware that the Authors Afternoon is an initiative of Prabhaketan Foundation, headed by Mr. Sandeep Putoria in collaboration with T2, The Telegraph, and Sri Cement Limited. We are very pleased to be the hosts. It is my honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Joshua Pollock, a dedicated spiritual aspirant. Pollock is an enthusiast about sharing his passion for meditation. He frequently lectures and holds practical demonstrations in various settings, including corporate, educational, and government institutions. He also provides ongoing individual support to seekers. A best-selling author of Heartfulness Way is a Heartfulness practitioner and trainer from the United States. An accomplished Western classical violinist, he has performed and taught throughout the world, including numerous collaborations with A.R. Rahman, Yuvraj, Gajni, Delhi 6, Ravan, etc., etc. To be in conversation with him, we welcome Varuna Shunglu, a lawyer, teacher, and founder of Kyogi Wellness, a community of wellness aficionados who believe in the intrinsic power of the mind. Varuna's style of teaching combines asana, practice in a traditional hatha setting, with deep understanding of the breathing, combined with Vedic chanting and meditation. So to take the session forward, I would invite both of you on stage and wish you a pleasant hearing all this afternoon. Thank you so much.
So today we'll be in conversation with Mr. Joshua Pollock about his book, The Heartfulness Way. So what I found very interesting was the way the entire book is written in the form of a dialogue between him and his teacher, Kamlesh D. Patel, who's also very fondly known as Daji. And today we would like to start the entire session by having Mr. Pollock do a small meditation with all of us. So I'm handing it over to him now.
So, nice to be with you all today. I don't know how often you start these sessions with meditation. This heartfulness approach to meditation is so simple, but I leave it to you to conclude what the effects will be like. In order to meditate in this way, we simply presume that divine light is present in the heart. This, I would say, is not a belief, but rather is a hypothesis that divine light is present in the heart. What's the difference between a belief and a hypothesis? Hypothesis needs to be verified. Belief, you're satisfied without verifying it. So this is a hypothesis. We presume the presence of this divine light in the heart. And then meditation itself becomes the experiment by which you can verify its presence. And that is something that occurs through feeling. Divine light is not something that you see. It's not something that you imagine. It's something that only you can feel. So meditation becomes an exercise in which we gently rest our attention on the heart and go into a feeling mode. Gently rest your attention on your heart, and then in a very relaxed way, in a very patient way, see what you feel. That's all it is. It sounds very simple, doesn't it? It is very simple, in fact. But it's actually the simplest things which we sometimes find the most difficult, I have to say. Now everyone says, what do I do with my mind during meditation? Shouldn't I be doing something? Mind anyway will be doing something. Mind's nature is to think. The idea that we should attain a perfectly thoughtless state during meditation is a popular notion which I don't think we need to entertain. Mind is not an enemy, it has its purpose. And its purpose is to produce thoughts. Only problem is that sometimes it produces unnecessary thoughts, right? But never mind. In this meditation, we're going into the state of feeling. And the thoughts that will definitely come, you can treat them in the same way as you would treat the sound of children playing outside your window or car horns on the street. Background noise. So that's what we'll do now. And this will be a short, this will be a brief meditation. No more than 15 minutes. Some people might be thinking that doesn't sound very brief. Let's see, okay? Let's see. Now before we meditate, I'm going to actually walk you through a relaxation method. It's much easier to meditate when the body's relaxed, as it turns out. So I'll systematically go through every part of the body, and I'll ask you to relax your legs, relax your arms, things like that. And then at the end I'll say, please start meditating. And then you simply bring your attention to the heart and be open and see whatever it is that you experience, without any expectation. Okay? Even the photographers can feel free to join in after they get the shots that they want. Now, sit comfortably. Be comfortable. Gently close your eyes. Move your toes and relax them. Feel energy from the earth entering into the bottom of your feet, entering your feet through the soles and relaxing your feet. Now your ankles are getting relaxed. Relax your lower legs. Your knees. Your upper legs are relaxing. Relax your hips. Your abdomen. And waist. Relax your chest. Feel your shoulders relax. Feel as if they're just melting. Melting. Your hands, fingers, and fingertips are relaxing. Relax your mouth. Tongue and teeth. Relax all the muscles of the face. Let your eyes be very softly closed. Eyebrows, forehead, relaxing. Ears and earlobes are relaxed. All the way up to the top of your head. Completely relaxed. All the way to the back of your head. Relaxing. Now scan your whole body. Is there any place that requires further relaxation? If so, relax that muscle or that organ. And let your body be completely relaxed. And stay with this feeling for just a few more seconds, instead of just jumping out of it. Just remain still. Another 30 seconds or so.
What a wonderful feeling that is, don't you think? I mean, all I could think of was that I really needed it, like that little time just with myself. Whatever our varied experiences might have been, each of us have our own individual journeys, own individual experiences. There's so much that is happening all the time. I would like to ask Mr. Pollock, what was that time when he first started meditating himself? What is that first beginning, that start to the journey?
There are beginnings and beginnings and beginnings. I don't know what the first beginning was. When you go into a shop, when does the journey begin? Does it begin when you got out of your car? Does it begin when you got in the car in the first place? Or begin when you left your house? Or when you got out of your chair? So for me, it's impossible to trace back what's the real beginning. But I do remember distinctly becoming interested in all of this meditation. It happened, I remember once, I think some ISKCON people came to my house. They gave some pamphlets or something to my parents, who stashed them away in some drawer. And years later, I remember coming across this. I'd never seen any iconography, Indian iconography before. I think I was about 9 or 10 at the time. I thought, what is this? It struck some emotion in me. That wasn't the only thing. That was one thing among many things. My parents had a lot of books, huge book collection. They have different subjects. And I would go through them. I was the kind of kid who would read the encyclopedia for fun, actually. So I would go through all the books. And sometimes I'd come across something that was really fascinating. Something like the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu. I remember discovering Yoga Sutras, Patanjali. So these things really always caught my attention. Maybe because they were so absolutely different from everything else in my world, growing up in rural America. Such things that they were writing about, these authors were describing. Never heard of anything like it before. So naturally it was fascinating. But what to make of it all, I kept going. I read so many books like that, wherever I could find them. And eventually it occurred to me that no matter how much I read, I never experienced anything they were talking about. So I thought, well, oftentimes in these books they're talking about meditation, so that seems like a practical method. Not just about learning, not just about knowledge, but a practical path by which you can experience something. And I thought, this is what I need. So later, I was maybe 19 or 20, I moved away from home, and I really was avid. I was saying, let me learn this kind of meditation, let me try Tai Chi, let me try all these things. And I did all those things, and everything I did, I just had such high expectations, and every time those expectations were dashed, I never had a good experience. And I got disillusioned. And that was okay. But later on, once I no longer was expecting anything or had any faith that meditation even did anything at all except make you frustrated, which is what it did for me. I met someone randomly. And they said, okay, I do this Heartfulness. I filed it away mentally. A few months later, I came back to it. And I gave it a try. And for me, it was really good that I had all this basis of comparison. I don't know what I would have thought of Heartfulness meditation if I hadn't tried about 20 other methods. But because I had, now I had a basis for comparison. So I could see that this was having an effect that none of the other approaches had for me personally. And because of that, I was able to decide or conclude that this was a very potent method. And I became very intrigued as to where it would take me. quite. I'm still intrigued as to where it's going to take me, so I'm still moving.
The journey is never ending.
No. Well, we haven't found the end yet.
Right. So there was this very interesting analogy in the book. An asymptote is a line moving towards infinity, and how the line is always moving towards infinity but never really touching infinity, which is something that I found quite fascinating in the book. So could you tell us a little more about how we as individuals could be sort of...
So this is what she's referring to. I don't know if you can see it from here, but you have your own copies actually. There's a symbol at the back of the book. Anyone who knows math is familiar with the concept, right? The curve that meets the line at infinity, which means that for all practical purposes, they never touch. And so this is actually quite a concept. It's a lot to unpack, actually. So you have two words, right? You have the word yoga, and you have the word religion. And both of these words have similar meanings. Yoga comes from a word that means that which unites. Unites. So that means that things are separate. What does it unite? It means it unites me, my own individual being, with the universal. Right? So that must mean that I am somehow separate, or at least that I perceive myself to be separate, that I perceive and feel myself not to be connected to the universal. So yoga comes along and says, here's a method by which you can connect yourself to that, by which you can rather unite yourself with that and become one with it. Religion also comes from a root word that means to reconnect. So a similar meaning. Now, but the thing is that what we find is that as long as you remain as an individual entity, whether you're connected or not, there's always this idea of two in your mind. There's always this idea of God and I. God and I. So, as long as this identity remains intact, then you're like that asymptote. You can meditate and become more refined and feel that connection with ever-increasing reality. And yet at the same time, that infinity remains between. That infinity. So no matter how close you get, you're infinitely close, but infinitely far from your goal, from your destination as a yogi, as someone who is striving to attain the goal of yoga, which is union. So this remains, so that's just a hint. All it is a hint, this symbol. Something in you, this sense of I-ness, has to somehow dissolve itself. Because the two, they say it's a razor's edge, right? Vivekananda said that. Two cannot walk the path of love, he said. And that's exactly what he meant. So one of us has to go.
And do you think in an individual, as in the physical form, it is possible to unite completely?
Well, let's see. I mean, my guide, the co-author of this book, Daji, as we call him, he says, I've heard him say on a number of occasions, that this supposed grand culmination of yoga, this merger or union, well, this is just the beginning, or rather just the first step of spirituality, he says. So, I don't know, let's let that sink in.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, in the book itself, he talks a lot about the Yoga Sutras, and you all talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. And the focus, of course, is more on the last 3 or 4 limbs. Of course, he mentions that it's like a stool. You pull one foot, and the entire stool comes to you. It's all connected and interconnected. And the 8th limb being samadhi or complete merger would be only the beginning.
Mm.
So what would come after?
Yes, this is a good question. I think this is one of those things like you hang a carrot in front of a donkey. So, you know what I mean? Now you have some motivation to discover something.
Right.
Right? I mean, we can define it, but that definition wouldn't do much good for us personally. Right?
And when you met him for the first time, what was your experience like, and why do you feel that when you met him, you could sort of connect with him in a way that it would be like a relationship of a lifetime?
Well, I think, when I first met him, he was a brother. There was no kind of guru-aspirant relationship whatsoever. Because at that time, he was another aspirant just like I was. He's been meditating since he was a kid, since he was 19 years old in Gujarat. He started. And, this is not a sort of situation where you have a guru who comes and proclaims himself sent by God and, I'm here to lead you, anything like that. This is somebody who started meditating in the same heartfulness way that I'm meditating, that a few of us here are already meditating, and transformed himself through that practice. And then his own guru said, okay, you succeed me now when I go. And that's what happened. So when I first met him, that succession had not yet happened. And he was a friend. He was my friend's father, actually. We lived in the same apartment block for a time in Chennai. And his son, and I, we were always hanging out. So I always ended up in his apartment, and we have dosa, things like that. I'd go to him for advice sometimes. But, he was he struck me as somebody who I definitely could always turn to for advice, or, I felt very comfortable. A very grounded individual he was. And so after some time passed, and took us all by surprise and became the successor in this lineage of Raja Yoga masters. Okay, now all of a sudden, does the relationship change or not? So there was a level of comfort that had already been established previously, which I think made it very easy for these conversations to take place. So.
And I'm sure that many in the audience must have meditated before, but something very unique about the Heartfulness Way is that you have this very special yogic transmission, which is an integral part of the way you meditate, the entire format. Could you tell us a little more about it?
Well, I think maybe everyone in this audience can tell us something a little bit about it, because you had a taste of it just now when you were meditating. I don't know, you're probably not accustomed to be asked for a show of hands or anything like that, but how many people have meditated before here? A handful. Okay, so you can know for yourself whether this experience was different in any way from previous experiences, and how it was different, if it was. And I can tell you that you've experienced something called yogic transmission, or pranabhuti, in this meditation session. Now, what is this? We have to understand that this is not a belief system. I'm telling you, she's asking me some nice questions, and I'm giving some answers, but I'm not trying to give you answers so that you can come away with a belief in what I'm saying. This, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is very much an experiment. Spirituality itself is an experiment. Spirituality is, we're used to using so many devices invented and constructed by other people in our lives, right? Take the GPS system, take any kind of thing that we do in cars, everything. Somebody else invents it, someone else understands how it works. We don't need to understand all that back-end stuff. It's not necessary. We just need to know how to follow the thing, how to use it. That's it. Spirituality is a different story altogether. Spirituality, everyone has to experience them for themselves. Everyone has to learn for themselves. No other person can tell you how things are. No guru can tell you how things are. This is something only you can discover, right? So this is, as a result of this fact, spirituality is the opposite of a belief system. Spirituality, I think, is where people end up when they're fed up with belief systems. They want to discover the truth for themselves. They're maybe suspicious of what others have told them, or they haven't experienced the truth of what others have told them. Now they're setting out on their own voyage of discovery. So this is, for me, what spirituality inherently means. Now, where does yogic transmission come into this idea? This example is in the book. We're surrounded at all times by air. Do we feel that air at all times? No. We feel it. I feel it right now. But that's only because there's a vent there. So there's a breeze that's reaching me. Right? So now it's moving, and so therefore I feel it. It's animated in some way. Similarly, most of us, though we may believe in God, have we ever experienced it? Maybe. But this is a question to ask oneself. Have you experienced it, or do you only believe in this idea of the divine? Or disbelieve in it, as the case may be. To disbelieve in it would be honest if you've never experienced it. You should have some evidence, right? So, just like the air, perhaps we haven't ever experienced God. Fine. Transmission, I would say, is that breeze that I'm feeling right now. It's that breeze where somehow divine energy becomes animated. And we feel it. We feel this movement of divine energy within us all of a sudden. Or we feel the effects of it over time because we're meditating along with this energy. Energy which comes when we meditate along with a trainer, with someone who's been prepared to be able to impart this, or rather to trigger it, because it does not come from them. Just like the fan doesn't create the air that it's blowing on you. It just triggers its movement. That's it. So we can have a very simple definition of transmission. Divine energy, or very subtle energy of the highest nature, that is being utilized to transform us in some way, to transform our experience, and because of our experience is being transformed, our consciousness is being transformed, and because when our consciousness is transformed, we are transformed. And that's what this is all about. So that's a key to this method. And I think that the effects of transmission, in the very immediate sense, is that it gives us a different experience of meditation. Maybe you get a hint of it in this one that you just had. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 times. But very soon, you have a different experience of meditation. And, I think that from my own personal experience, I struggled for years with my mundane consciousness. Struggling with thoughts, struggling with emotions, struggling with physical sensations, trying to meditate. And no end in sight. But after, even one time for me, but even more, as time went on, it became even clearer when I meditated along with somebody who could impart this transmission. These difficulties disappeared very quickly within my meditation. Consciousness itself became sort of transformed in a way. And when that happens during meditation, then that also starts percolating into the rest of your 23 hours, your other 23 hours in your day. So very gradually you start noticing completely different experience of life, different awareness of things, subtler awareness. And it keeps moving like that. So that's one way to understand. Fundamentally though, this is not something, again, to be believed in. I welcome your doubts. I hope you doubt. This is the honest approach. But along with that doubt, at least this much of an open mind that would allow you to experience it again and again until you're satisfied that there either is something there or there's nothing there. Just to allow enough of an open mind to allow yourself to test it. That's it. That's all that's necessary.
So a very interesting sort of a definition, not a definition, maybe just a mention of what meditation is. You mentioned in the book that meditation does not create anything at all. It's not visualizing or it's not sort of imagining things. It's meditation is something which reveals. What does it reveal, you've mentioned? It is something that is authentic and true, which can never be created. It is as it is. Reality is as is as it is.
Yes.
So, say for those who are looking to meditate, what is the advice you would give, say, first-timers who never experienced it, for them to actually understand and imbibe what is authentic and true, instead of the other notions which do not really lead to meditation?
I don't think meditation is a skill where we have to learn how to do it and we have to learn to avoid certain preconceptions or adopt other attitudes. When you take a shower, right, the water is rushing over you and you're becoming clean. But would you call it that moment, that becoming clean, a skill? No, it's just an effect of the situation in which you've now found yourself or put yourself. Right? It's an effect.
More like a happening, it's
Yes,
just there.
it's something that's happening to you as a result. So in the same way, I would not call meditation a skill. I would just say that you're subjecting yourself to a process, and the results of that process happen automatically, in a natural way. So therefore, I would not think that we would have to struggle with such ideas of what's real, what's authentic,
Right.
what's not.
Right.
No, nothing like that.
A lot of first timers, when we try and sit and meditate, I've seen just people who've never done it before trying, maybe, get really restless after a while, opening an eye, looking around. So the key word here would be effort, whereas what we're actually looking at is effortlessness. So how does one move towards that effortlessly?
Well, okay, so let's say you're going to take a train. So now you have to go to the station. Once you're at the station, you only need to get on the train, and that train takes you to your destination. Once you're on the train, you don't have to do anything at all.
Right.
You don't have to pedal. You don't have to put your foot on the accelerator unless you're driving the train. You don't have to do anything. You just sit there, and it takes you by itself. But you do have to go to the station in the first place. So this is another way of understanding transmission. You close your eyes. You have to put your attention on your heart. That much is your job.
Right.
But then, when all of a sudden this transmission, you start to feel it. You start to feel this effect in your heart, this lightning sensation, or however it manifests. All of a sudden now that feeling takes over, and that feeling then draws you into meditation. Just like the train takes you to your destination. Automatically you go into a state of meditation like that. But first thing you have to do is, so there's a mix of effort and effortlessness. The actual state of meditation, or let's say, as we were mentioning, samadhi, will come only not as a result of your efforts.
Right.
But the initial, you have to sit down, you have to close your eyes, and that first step, a little effort is there.
Right. Which leads to effortlessness.
Yes. It puts you in a situation in which effortlessness can take over.
Right. And to, say, attain this state, the first step that you take, you mentioned 2 to 3 things which sort of focus on that, which is, of course, prayer, cleaning. Could you highlight a little bit on that?
Okay, so this is the
Just a
whole
little
practice.
preparation.
This practice is sort of a 3-part practice. Meditation, number 1. Okay. Something we call cleaning, and prayer, which everybody knows prayer. Except I don't really think everybody knows prayer. Because I think we all, not all of us, but many of us have an idea that pray for something, receive something. It's like ordering something on Amazon. Click the order, and you get something in the mail. This is very okay. But here, remember that this word yoga, that which unites. So we're trying here to unite with something. So this sort of prayer should be a prayer which leads to that goal. We have 3 practices, but those 3 practices shouldn't be leading us in 3 different directions. They should all be leading us in one direction. So how does prayer accomplish that? Oftentimes, if you think, I'm now praying to this deity, whoever it is, you've definitely established a dualistic relationship now. Right? There is myself and the one to whom I'm praying. Now, the idea is to pray in such a way that this intimacy and togetherness starts growing. I don't think intimacy and togetherness can ever grow in the kind of situation when you're taking advantage of someone else. If you're sitting down next to your loved one thinking, what can they give me? Or what can I do to manipulate them into giving me something? So this is not the route to real closeness, to real togetherness and love, is it? And we know this from our human relationships. How much more this must be the case in the divine relationship. So this praying for benefits, I think we should have another think about that. And think of what kind of prayer it should be instead, which would lead us to a state where this closeness. Now, meditation. See, prayer should lead us to a state of meditation. And meditation, when you lose yourself completely, when you go deep into meditation, and some people think they've fallen asleep, right? Now you've lost yourself. What remains? You're not even there to be able to say what remains. Can it be an entry, a first step into that state of union, perhaps? That state of union when you dissolve yourself and only the object of your search is manifesting itself? So prayer should lead to that. And cleaning, this other practice. See, there's a lot to say. We have to clean. What is being cleaned? This is not, when she says cleaning, she's not talking about taking a bath. She's not talking about going to the Ganges. She's talking about a meditative practice, which we do, generally at the end of the day. Something that when we come back home from work or from wherever we are, and after having dealt with all the problems at the office, then we have the traffic on the way home, and then so many things. You're feeling a little bit worn out, perhaps. It's common. You feel some amount of stress, some amount of after effects of the day's interactions are, weighing on you to a certain extent. And you feel like you want some kind of refreshment. You want to feel fresher and lighter. You need that. And this cleaning process accomplishes this. So generally we do this practice when we come home from work, in the evening. We sit down for a few minutes, silently perform this inner exercise, and as a result of this exercise, we just feel so light. And this sort of you feel almost joyful inside, because so much of the day's burdens have been removed from you. So now you're really fit to interact with your family members, because everyone complains about work-life balance, right? Because everyone knows that the family time is the most important time, and that the job is something which you have to have a job so you can support your family, so that you can have a family in the first place. But then the job is number one. You devote all of your energy to that. When you're fresh in the morning, you go and devote yourself to your work, and then by the time you've got nothing left, by the time you're totally drained, now you can devote that to your family, the remnants of yourself you're devoting now to your family, which is of course the most important thing. So I think this freshens us up in an inner sense, and allows us to make the most of those interactions which matter most to us in life. And also, when you're really tired, or when you've had a rough day, or you become most reactive at those times. Somebody says something first thing in the morning, you can brush it off, right? But 6 o'clock in the evening, after you've just gone through, the office and the traffic, your child or your spouse says something to you, you'll snap at them. You've had enough. You don't want to hear it anymore. So I think that this cleaning is something which improves our most important relationships in our life. And also it helps us a lot. Because what is being cleaned? It's this emotional residue that we're carrying from our interactions, our daily interactions. And these things, you actually have to get rid of it on a daily basis. Because what happens if you don't? It builds up and builds up. It goes down to your subconscious. example from the book. There's a place, an example is given where one unfortunate soul goes and gets bitten by a snake. Okay. Before that, he didn't have a fear of snakes. But what do you think? Now he has a fear of snakes, right? So next time he's walking along, he survived, of course. Next time he's walking along, now he sees some rope or some hose coiled on the ground. Oh, he jumps. And the first thing in his mind is a snake. First thing. So, but it isn't. So you see, now an illusion has been created in his mind as a result of that fear, as a result of that experience that he had. So in a similar way, I think we often drift further away from the reality of things as a result of our experiences that we've had. You can understand this, in another way. You can say that, suppose you meet somebody who has a particular look. He has a beard, dresses a certain way. And you have a bad experience with this person. He's rude to you or something. Next time you see someone who looks like that, automatically you won't like that. It's a different person now, but automatically you won't like his face. Right? So this has nothing to do with this poor person who you're projecting onto now. But you've brought that with you from the past. And so that past experience has become a filter through which you're now seeing the world. So now you're not living in reality. You're living according to your past, previous conditioning. So you can see how this builds up and builds up and builds up with so many experiences that we have. So this cleaning method, in a very simple and easy way, removes these filters, you can say. Removes the emotional content of our memories. Memory remains. Existential memory stays with you. But this factor that makes you react, that leaves you. So, now there's the possibility of living in the present rather than reacting to things that happened in the past.
Right. And before we open the stage to the audience, one last question would be, so this knowledge which has been transmitted to us teacher after teacher and finally reached us, I know that a lot of us have different notions and conditioning about what the word guru means to each person. What does the word mean to you?
Well, the word actually, there's actually different ways to understand the Sanskrit roots of this word. One way is big one or great one, right? That's one way of translating the word. But that would mean something from whom things flow. Something big, things can flow. But as it's said in the book, these days when you see gurus, it's usually the other way around. Because gurus are expecting things to flow to them. Gurus are expecting love, attention, money, respect, admiration, obedience. Gurus are expecting all of these things. As we see generally what's happening. So this is the opposite situation to what the word itself implies. So obviously something is very backwards with our notion of what a guru is. If this is what we think a guru is, then something's gone wrong. Essentially, this is a method which provides you a way to gain guidance from within. There is this passage in Gita, in the chapter about meditation, Dhyana Yoga. In this chapter, you have Lord Krishna saying, I am in the heart of all created things. So this is in the chapter about meditation. I am in the heart of all created things. Now what happens when we meditate on the heart? Our mind settles on the heart. Our consciousness comes into contact, after some practice, with that divine presence in the heart, which is mentioned in the Gita. Now all of a sudden, as a result of that contact, we begin to receive some inspiration from the heart. What to do in this situation. Some answer comes. How to handle this. Some guidance comes. And now we start very slowly to be able to discriminate between the many ideas that we have on a daily basis and these pure signals from within. And then we learn to be able to follow them. So then now our life becomes a guided life, you could say. Like this, on every Gita copy, you have this image of the chariot, right? The charioteer and the person riding the chariot. Charioteer, of course, is Lord Krishna, right? The person riding in the chariot is Arjuna. Now, our lives become very much like this. Because now if our lives are guided, because we're receiving guidance from within as a result of the contact that we've established during meditation, now this is the thing which is initiating our actions, and guiding our actions. And we become like passengers. We can just sit back and relax. Right? So we have to sensitize ourselves to these signals from within.
That's where the effortlessness comes into play.
Yes, it becomes an effortless thing.
Right.
And we sensitize ourselves to those signals from within. That means we have to sensitize ourselves to our hearts, to the true signal. But what happens now? You see in the news so many stories about gurus where some situation has been created where it's a power relationship. Power relationship in which the guru has utter control over the disciple's life. And you see all the crazy things that happen as a result. I would say that in such a situation could only arise when a person has somehow become utterly desensitized to these signals from within that I was just talking about. This guidance from within, I think you would have had to somehow close that valve completely in order to accept this type of situation, where you're not listening to your heart, instead you're only listening to the words of someone external to yourself who's telling you to do this, to do that, to do the other thing. So, what is the role of a guru then? I never look at guru as an external source. I look at guru as this presence that's within. Now sometimes you need a guide to help you to become cognizant of that. For me, that's the role of the guru. Ultimately, the final say is always here. Always here. If there's in some hypothetical situation where guru says one thing and heart says another thing, this one wins. Heart. Because anyway, the heart will always win if you're sensitive to it. And I mentioned yogic transmission a few times. It's still a mysterious concept. I know it hasn't been perfectly defined. It will never be perfectly defined, except by your own experience of it. Yet, from where does it come? So I think we can only find out the answer about what a guru is, again through experience. You can, choosing a guru, supposing that you're interested in one, or you're curious, it's a bit of a dicey subject. How are you supposed to recognize somebody who can help you from somebody who wants to con you? From somebody who's going to, want your money or something, or worse. So the best thing is to forget about this idea of gurus. Instead, focus on the practice. I was always skeptical of gurus. That's why I waited so many months between hearing about this practice and beginning it. Only thing that caused this gap was because someone had said there's a guru associated with this practice, and me, I said no way. But at least I said, okay, let me at least see what this practice is like. Right? Having tried the practice, having experienced this practice some months, I could see that the practice was working. I said, okay, this is doing something positive for me. Now, a few days ago, tailor made a coat for me. How do I know if the tailor's any good? If it makes a good jacket. If the jacket's no good, then you can conclude something about the tailor. So same thing. If a guru has a practice, you you try the practice. If the practice is good, you can say something about the practice is not working for you. Well, like that. So, again, has to be assessed internally by examining yourself.
Of course, some practices would work for certain people and it wouldn't work for
That's
some
another.
people.
That's
So it would have to be a
another
very individual journey.
But one thing is for sure, and it says this in the book, if as a result of association with a particular guru, or forget guru, with anybody, not a guru but a friend or an associate or a colleague, if as a result of that association your heart becomes heavy, you feel disturbed, you should understand something about whether or not you want to be around that person anymore. Whether you want to be associated, however tenuously, with that person. If, on the other hand, your association with that person grants you a sense of peace and calmness, then you can form your own conclusion there too.
We take a few questions from the audience because
Yes.
we're running out of time yet.
So we'll take any questions from the audience.
Hi.
I have a question about readiness. Readiness of the person who wants to meditate. And when you started speaking about your own journey, initial journey, where you tried out many different techniques before, and you were quite skeptical when you came to this, would there be anything that you were not ready for it when you first started? That's my question.
Yes. You can, there is, a butterfly, gestation periods
Yes.
in nature. Every species has its own gestation period, but gestation period is always there. And to try to remove the butterfly from the cocoon before that gestation period is up, you may be so impatient to see the beautiful butterfly, but that impatience will end in sorrow if you cut the cocoon. So the right time is necessary for the right thing, of course.
So it's okay to keep trying. If it doesn't happen with the first technique, try the second, third.
Of course. But I think you should give each technique a fair trial. You try it one day, oh, it's no good. No. If you really want to give it a trial, give it, even a week. But for a really fair trial, I would say a month at least. Month, 2 months. So you can see its effects. It's one thing. Daji once told me, it doesn't, if your he said if your mother has cooked something, you only need 1 teaspoonful to know if it's good or not. So in a sense, with meditation too, you can see where it's going to take you. At least you can get a hint of it. At least you can get a taste of it in 1 session. But if you really want to know where it's going to take you, give it more than 1 session. Give it a few months, because then you're going to be able to see some transformation, hopefully, over a period of time. And especially if you keep notes, if you keep a journal every single day, then you can not only see how you feel, go back and compare your notes to when you started a few months earlier, and very clearly see whether there's a transformation and which direction, if any, that change is taking you. So, important things to be very clear and scientific about this.
So you tried a number of methods, but did you give each one enough time?
Well, I did not at that point have this conscious attitude of experimentation. At that point, I would try something, I never said, let me try this for 3 months. I said, let me try this. And I would try it, and, oftentimes, I think I tried them for too long, not too short. Because that's just my own peculiar nature. My determination made me think that if I do this not just for 1 month, but if I do this for 6 months, surely I'll master it. So I never had this problem where I was jumping around, like one day one thing, next day another thing. My problem was that I didn't give up soon enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one question. Regarding your posture for starting of meditation, what according to you should be the ideal posture?
Posture, there are ideal postures, of course.
For example, eyes closed or eyes half closed?
We meditate with closed eyes in this approach. Now, for this approach, closed eyes is necessary. Not just ideal, but necessary. But there are other meditations, of course, where the proper way to meditate is with the eyes half closed.
Yeah.
I'm aware of those as well, but the purpose of these meditations also could be different. In this method, we first of all go by this fundamental principle that you find in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where he speaks about asana, but he only speaks about it in one context. And I'm unable to say this quote in the original language, because
You can say it in the
I'm
language.
a stupid American,
You can
but
get it, yeah.
basically it translates to posture should be that which is steady and comfortable.
I'd like to add, it's called Sthiram Sukham Asana
Yes.
in Sanskrit.
So that's what he says about posture. And
Isn't that in slight contradiction with the posture which is explained in Bhagavad Gita?
there's a lot of things that Bhagavad Gita refers to some very specific situations.
I think there is a particular chapter in Bhagavad Gita about the posture of meditation which clearly states that you should not be that comfortable that you go into a comfort zone. It
Yes.
says that you should sit in a seat which is not soft and smooth. It should be a bit it should be a bit rough, and your eyes should be half closed so that you are not completely detached from your vision is not, you are not completely closed from the outer reality, physical reality, and then your arms should be stretched out straight with your arms facing outwards. Like there is a full description of that. So what you're saying, I don't know which particular, because I joined a bit late, so I will not be knowing exactly which particular school of meditation has been discussed here, but just know what you mentioned, just saying that, isn't it in a slight contradiction to what has been mentioned in the book?
Contradictions, I think, there will always be contradictions. But there's no contradiction in the ultimate state which we arrive. That Bhagavad Gita wants you to arrive at one state. Patanjali wants you to arrive at the same state. They prescribe different ways, different roads to get there, but they don't disagree on the fundamental concept.
Absolutely.
See, I think it's like that. And actually, in this book, of course, this steady and comfortable is quoted, but then Daji also goes on to say that we should also not be too comfortable.
Yeah, true.
See, because this whole idea of comfort and discomfort becomes a distraction in of itself.
Yeah.
And becomes if you're just enjoying your comfort, again, your object of meditation becomes your comfort.
Because I have seen many instances, I've seen with myself, I've seen people literally doze off when trying to, when trying to read it. I've experienced, people just, sit and then close eyes, cool air around them, that goes into a spin, so that's how it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's all the time that we have for today.
Is it?
Yes.
Well,
We were really enjoying the conversation. Thank you all for being here today and listening and sort of interacting with us. So I'd like to thank all of you once again.
Thank you.
I thank you too.
And I would like to thank both of you, Joshua and Varuna, for this heartful conversation, which obviously has gone down very well with all of us, and we definitely love to try it out in our daily lives. Here is a small souvenir.